Look at this property outside Salem, Idaho. From the road, it looks like nothing. A pet cemetery sign, a modest home, a yard where a man told neighbors he buried his animals when they died. In June of 2020, investigators walked that yard with cadaver dogs and shovels, and what they were looking for was not an animal. They were looking for a 7-year-old boy named JJ and his 16-year-old sister, Tylee. But before officers ever put a shovel in that ground, both children had already been described by the people closest to them as something other than children. Not missing, not hidden, something else. That is where this case actually begins, and it is not with a body. JJ Vallow was adopted at 4 months old. He had autism, and he loved routine, cartoons, and being close to his mother. Tylee Ryan was his older sister, 16, quiet, artistic, the one who packed his lunch and walked him to the bus. Their mother was Lori Vallow, a woman friends described as devout, warm, the kind of person who organized church events and posted about her faith online. On the surface, this was an ordinary family in Chandler, Arizona. Underneath it, according to prosecutors, something had already started to shift. These were not case files yet. They were simply 2 children in an ordinary family orbit. School, routines, relatives, phone calls, small daily details that only become painful later because no one knew they were about to disappear. These were not case files yet. They were simply 2 kids in a quiet Arizona neighborhood, living the kind of ordinary afternoon that never makes it into a police report. It started with books. Lori had begun reading near-death experience literature, the kind that promises visions of the afterlife and spiritual missions on Earth. Family members later told police she began talking differently. She said she could see spirits. She said some people carried light and some people carried dark. At a conference for religious preppers in 2018, she met a man named Tammy Daybell, a self-published author of apocalyptic fiction, who believed he had lived past lives and could sense the end of the world approaching. They believed they had been married in another life. Both of them were already married to other people. Around the same time, Lori's inner circle began to grow. A woman named Melanie Gibb, a close friend from church, was pulled into these conversations early, recording podcasts with Lori about faith long before any of this turned dark. Another woman, Zulema Pistenis, became someone Lori went to for spiritual guidance. Within that small group, the language of light and dark spirits was not a private thought Lori kept to herself. It was shared, discussed, and applied to real people in her life, one after another, as though she were sorting the people around her into categories that had nothing to do with how they actually treated her. Within a year, both of those marriages ended in death. Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, was shot in July 2019 by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, in what was ruled self-defense after a physical struggle. Charles had spent months before his death telling police and family that his wife's beliefs had become dangerous. He said she told him he was not really Charles anymore. He said she believed she could kill a spirit and leave the body unharmed. 4 months after Charles died, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, a librarian and mother of 5, died in her sleep. The death was first treated as natural. Chad remarried Lori 2 weeks later in Hawaii. Tammy's body would later be exhumed. Her death was ruled a homicide. The pattern did not stop there. In October 2019, a man named Brandon Boudreau, married to Lori's niece and locked in a custody dispute with her, had his car window shattered by a single bullet outside his home in Gilbert, Arizona. He survived. Investigators later determined the vehicle used in that shooting had been registered to Charles Vallow, a man who was already dead by the time the shot was fired. Detectives believed Lori, Chad, and Alex Cox had modified that vehicle themselves, removing a back seat and a wheel so someone could fire from inside it. According to the same police report, the couple had described Brandon using the same language they used for everyone else who stood in their way. He was, in their private conversations, a dark soul and a high-level one at that. Here is the detail that separates this case from an ordinary murder file. According to text messages and testimony later presented at trial, Lori and Chad did not describe the people who stood between them and their beliefs as inconvenient or dangerous, or even as enemies. They described them as spirits. Charles, prosecutors said, had become a dark spirit named Ned. Tammy, in their private messages was described as a body that needed to be vacated so a different soul could return. And in the months before JJ and Tylee disappeared, the same language turned toward the children. Prosecutors alleged that Lori came to believe JJ and Tylee had been possessed by dark spirits. In the language used inside her small circle of followers, the children were no longer described as children. They were called zombies. That word does the real work in this case, not because it is theatrical, but because of what it allowed. If a child is simply a child, harming them requires overriding love, instinct, and years of memory. But if a child has already been reclassified as something that only looks like a child, something already gone, something dangerous wearing a familiar face, then the moral cost of what comes next changes. The disturbing question this case raises is not whether the spirits were real. It is what a belief like that permits a person to do once it takes hold, and how quietly that permission can be granted, one private conversation at a time, without a single outsider ever hearing it happen. Tylee was last seen alive at Yellowstone National Park on September 8, 2019, with her mother, her brother JJ, and her uncle Alex Cox. It is one of the last ordinary images in the case: a family trip, a national park, a teenage girl still visible in the world. JJ was seen later. He was enrolled at Kennedy Elementary School in Rexburg, and records and reporting place his last confirmed public sighting later in September. That gap matters because it means the children did not vanish from the world at exactly the same moment. Tylee went silent first. Then JJ's grandparents stopped receiving calls. A nanny was told JJ was with a friend. When Rexburg police arrived for a welfare check in November, Lori told them JJ was staying with a friend in Arizona. That claim was false. Records pulled from her phone by investigators reportedly showed photographs of ammunition purchased around the same window in which JJ was last photographed, filed alongside ordinary phone clutter, receipts, selfies, as if nothing about that week had been unusual at all. JJ's grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, were the ones who eventually forced this case into the open. Unable to reach Lori for weeks, unable to get a straight answer about their grandson, they went to police and then to the media, appearing on camera, weeks turning into months, to ask Lori directly to explain where the children were. Lori never answered them. She and Chad gave no public statement, no denial, no explanation, while a nationwide search unfolded around two missing children whose own mother would not say a word. By December, Lori and Chad had left Idaho. Investigators, family members, and reporters spent months trying to locate two children who had, according to every account given by their mother, simply been somewhere else. Cell phone records later reviewed by detectives placed Alex Cox's phone at two specific locations on September 9th and September 23rd, the same two locations where JJ and Tylee's remains would eventually be found, buried on the property Chad Daybell called a pet cemetery. JJ's body was found wrapped tightly in plastic and duct tape, his hands folded across his chest. Tylee's remains had been burned. Investigators would later testify that cell activity, burn patterns, and witness statements placed the deaths within days of each other in the same narrow window that the family's own belief system was, according to prosecutors, actively evolving to explain. Lori was arrested in Hawaii in early 2020, initially only on charges of child abandonment, months before her children's remains were ever found. She was extradited to Idaho, and it would be nearly a year before murder charges followed. Chad's arrest came only after investigators searched his property and found what they had spent months looking for: cadaver flags marking two small patches of ground that would end nearly a year of searching in a single afternoon. A judge later separated Lori and Chad into two trials. Lori's defense would go on to argue she was with two friends and with Chad in her own apartment at the time her children died, a claim that placed responsibility instead on her late brother, Alex Cox, who had died of natural causes before he could ever be charged with anything. This is the point in the case file where the line between belief and evidence stops being metaphorical. Prosecutors did not simply argue that Lori and Chad held unusual religious views. They argued in open court that those views functioned as motive, as justification, and as a shared vocabulary that let two adults plan and carry out the deaths of 2 children and 1 adult without, in their own private language, describing it as murder at all. The belief system was entered into trial. Text messages using the words dark spirit, zombie, and light were read aloud to a jury as evidence of premeditation, not as a footnote about a strange couple. What we know is this: JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan died in September of 2019. Their remains were recovered from Chad Daybell's property in June of 2020. Charles Vallow was shot and killed in July of 2019. Tammy Daybell died in October of 2019 in a death later ruled a homicide. Lori Vallow Daybell was convicted in 2023 of murdering both of her children and of conspiracy in Tammy's death. Chad Daybell was convicted in 2024 of murdering JJ, Tylee, and Tammy and was sentenced to death. What was reported is that prosecutors described a belief system in which the couple saw themselves as central figures in an approaching apocalypse and saw certain people, including Lori's own children, as obstacles inhabited by spirits that needed to be removed before that mission could continue. What still does not fit cleanly into any single explanation is the exact moment the language turned from private and strange into operational. Somewhere between a mother reading paperback spiritual books and a mother standing over her son's grave, the words she used to describe him changed. No text message, no witness, no piece of trial evidence marks the precise hour that shift happened. It is the one detail the case file cannot supply because it did not happen in a police report. It happened somewhere inside a belief where no camera was recording and no one else was invited in. Trial exhibits could show jurors body cam footage of a welfare check, a bank statement, a burial site marked with cadaver flags. None of it could show the exact conversation, the exact night, where a mother stopped seeing her son as her son. The official story is that this was a series of murders committed for money, control, and a marriage that could not legally happen while 3 other people were still alive. That much the evidence supports clearly. But for the investigators who read those messages line by line, one detail never sat comfortably inside an ordinary motive. Before JJ and Tylee were ever reported missing, before a single shovel touched that Idaho yard, they had already stopped in the eyes of the people who were supposed to protect them being described as children at all.